And good afternoon, everybody. This is Emar Sopertoot, and welcome to another edition of the Verbal Submission Podcast. Very excited that you're able to join us today for the show. It's a fully packed hour of mixed martial arts, professional wrestling, and boxing content for you. So we're very excited to bring that to you today on the show. We're going to discuss several major topics, including the WWE Super Show that took place in Saudi Arabia on June 7th. We're going to break down each of the matches and content from that show. We'll discuss New Japan Dominion, took place in Japan on June 9th, the next day. I have a lot of thoughts on that. And a little bit of a miscellaneous department. We usually do that for the regular Sports Inquirer show, but we'll carry it over into Verbal Submission. We'll talk about UFC 238. Two major boxing rematches announced to take place later on in the year. I have some thoughts on that as well. But as always, if you want to follow everything that we're doing on the site, head to thesportsinquirer.net, premier site for news and notes in the world of sports. We have some very good items. Our previous shows, Verbal Submission, we brought back after about a 2-year hiatus. We did a show last week, and we're doing one now. If you head to the site, you can do a search and find our last show there. Verbal Submission 5, just Verbal Submission 6 that we're recording today. So make sure you check that out. On Twitter and Instagram, Sports Inquirer, all one word. Just subscribe to that, and that'll be a great way to get all of the up-to-date content that we have. On Facebook, The Sports Inquirer, those are separate words. Make sure you do a search on there and follow us from there. On YouTube and SoundCloud, The Sports Inquirer, those are you search those terms, The Sports Inquirer, and you will find our site, all of our previous shows, current shows, and future ones. And we were able to find a way to upload our audio podcasts and all the audio shows to YouTube. Very excited about that. So you can do a search on YouTube as well. And when you subscribe to our page, you'll get all of our previous shows from the past as far as that goes. So very excited about that recent development on everything that's going on. And I think that's all we have for the introduction. And when we come back, we're going to discuss the WWE Super Show. Took place in Saudi Arabia on June 7th, here on the Verbal Submission. All right, then we're back to the Verbal Submission podcast. Probably the most controversial show that WWE does every year is a Saudi Arabia show for several reasons. One, it's at an odd part of the calendar year. We're so used to having the big four pay-per-views. I call them pay-per-views. I know they're on the WWE network now. Technically, you're still paying for them, but they're not the traditional pay-per-view model that we've gotten used to over the years. We're used to having the Royal Rumble in January, first part of the year. WrestleMania, the biggest one of them all, in March or April. SummerSlam in August towards the end of the summer. And the Survivor Series, which takes place in November. It used to be on Thanksgiving night. I'm old enough to remember when it took place on that Thursday, but now they've gotten a little bit looser with that. So probably the last weekend of November, sometimes even into December. So when we started getting used to those four pay-per-views, that was fine. Then around the 90s is when you started seeing pay-per-views maybe every other month. You started seeing In Your House, King of the Ring. So you can speak strictly WWE. I'm not going into WCW, NWA, ECW, all of that stuff. But we started seeing from WWE those type of shows coming up. Now that we got to the 2000s, they got very specific. You started seeing the Elimination Chamber. You started having the why am I blanking on the? Yes, the Elimination Chamber. You had Money in the Bank, and you also had TLC, the Table, Ladders, and Chairs. So while those events would be featured, like Elimination Chamber would have been a main event for a SummerSlam, or you would have seen the Money in the Bank as part of the WrestleMania card. They started making those exclusive events within the monthly schedule. So now we got to 12 pay-per-views per year. Now we're into the stage where you're having the development of the WWE network within the past few years. And now not only do we get the 12 pay-per-views that we've started seeing in the 2000s, now we're starting to see these WWE-specific special shows. You're starting to see some house shows take place. They had the Great American Bash on there. The Clash of the Champions were events that you started seeing on the WWE Network. War Games, and this is when you start seeing some of the old WCW, NWA events, like War Games has been incorporated into the NXT brand. So those are starting to be shows specifically set within the WWE Network model. With that, now we've seen the Saudi Arabia Super Shows. Very controversial for several reasons. As I mentioned, more wrestling, it's a lot of extra content, but the event itself being in Saudi Arabia, not going to get into the politics much of it, but it is an area that has a lot of controversy as far as human rights and women's rights. The human rights side, if you follow the politics, there's been some interesting developments and unfortunately some fatalities in relation to journalists and other people not having their sovereignty. I'll just leave it at that. So that's been controversial. And then the women's rights as far as being able to live the life that we're used to seeing. We're based in the United States. So the concepts of women going to work and driving and voting, those are things we take or assume are just normal standards for a citizen of the United States. Saudi Arabia has a different take on those things, and that's their culture, that's their country, and that's what they want to do. However, with that, you have the WWE, which has been championing, rightfully, and some would say overdue, the women's revolution as far as having equal participation with women matches and men's matches being pushed as far as being further up on the card, things along those lines. And that's been a big focus from not only with Stephanie McMahon, who's obviously one of the owners and runners, operators, is part of this family business, the WWE, obviously having that going on. She's been doing a lot of work behind the scenes with that and now on camera with that, and the women's championships. And we've seen the women's revolution, a lot of wrestlers. This past WrestleMania, the main event was a 3-woman match between Ronda Rousey, Becky Lynch, and Charlotte Flair, which had never happened before. There had never been a main event for the women, or a women's main event at WrestleMania. So you have all of that and the push towards that. And then you go to Saudi Arabia, and as I've mentioned, the lack of women's rights in their culture. So there's a conflict there with the WWE going there. And furthermore, there was a women's match that was scheduled, I believe, at least with Becky Lynch or Alexa Bliss, along those lines, and maybe Natalia. I think it was Natalia and Becky Lynch. No, it was Natalia and Alexa Bliss. That match did not happen. They flew all the way over there. It got canceled, I guess, during the planning of it. It did not happen. Renee Young was a commentator woman on the show. That's a kind of step in the right direction. But it was very weird, though, seeing it, because the perception, I've mentioned all of the issues with Saudi Arabia that have been presented outwardly, and as far as women and not being able to attend things publicly and what to wear. But I looked in the audience, and there were women wearing wrestling T-shirts at the event. So I don't see what the conflict is. If you delve deeper into it, and the Saudi Arabia government, they had women there at the event, and the young women, the young girls were there, yet there was no women's wrestling match that was originally scheduled to take place. And Renee Young was still able to do her commentary. So just a lot of conflicts there. So that's where the one thing with the Super Show that causes a lot of confusion. Second thing is just the makeup of the card and the way it's set up. And we'll start right with the main event. You would figure WWE has 2 champions. You have Kofi Kingston with the championship, and you also have Seth Rollins. Those 2 men were nowhere near the main event. The main event was The Undertaker and Bill Goldberg. 15 years ago, this match would have been very intriguing. 20 years ago, even better. But now, at 2019, these guys are they're legends. They're Hall of Famers. They've had tremendous careers. But the fact that we have not seen either man actively in the wrestling in the ring in close to a year, sometimes even for one of them even longer than that, is very unusual. It seemed like it was from all right, we're gonna have Goldberg and Undertaker. We didn't get to see it in 2002. Now we're going to see it in 2019. Both men, you could tell, are well past their prime, and the match itself was disappointing. For their parts, they both looked, I think, okay physically. Goldberg looked in very good shape for both men in their 50s at this stage of their career. Unfortunately, during the match, Goldberg went for a spear near the Undertaker was on one turnbuckle. He avoided this Goldberg spear, and Goldberg went straight into the pole, gashed his head, and it was concussed. We can just say that he was not there for the rest of the match. Now they finished the match, but unfortunately, with Goldberg being down or not being his full self, 15, 20 years ago, Undertaker, who if you did a top 10 list of all-time wrestlers, he would be on there, could carry the match and make it respectable. Unfortunately, the Undertaker is in the advanced age of his career, was not able to do that, and it was a very sloppy finish. Tombstones were barely able to be executed. Spears and the jackhammer was a struggle for Goldberg to try to pull off. Undertaker ended up winning, but even after the match, you could tell that he was not a very happy camper with that match. Now, both guys, I'm sure, made a pretty nice payday and got a nice cut of the check, but overall, to see those two guys out there in 100-degree weather, it was shot at nighttime, but it was still, the sun was down, and it was still 100 degrees. It's Saudi Arabia. That's just the way things are in that part of the world, at least this time of year. So it was very hot in the stands, very high. It was open. It was an open stadium too. It wasn't an enclosed arena. It was an open soccer stadium, or a rugby stadium or cricket. Something. It was an outdoor big stadium. So you have all of that, and it was very cool to see the fireworks and all that stuff. The show was very well done as far as production-wise, but you have two men in their 50s wrestling under those conditions, not very good. You had Mansoor win the 50-man Battle Royal. Too many people in the match. I understand the 30 men is enough when they do the Royal Rumble. They did 40 men, I believe, last year, and it felt like it was a little crowded. To have 50 men in there and all in there around the same time was a little too much to deal with, I think. And it was no organization. You just had them in there fighting. I couldn't keep up with what was going on. I guess they were trying to incorporate that 24/7 title as well with R-Truth and Jinder Mahal and Titus O'Neil, and dealing with all that stuff. I didn't get the flow of it at all. And then Mansoor, who's a Saudi Arabia native, he won the 50-man Battle Royal. So it was a feel-good story for the fans that were there. They seemed very excited. Their local hero won, but I didn't like that Battle Royal at all. Yeah, Kofi Kingston defeating Dolph Ziggler to retain the WWE Championship. You know, overall, it's a feud that a little more build-up should have been used, because these two guys have been some of the longer tenured guys still on the roster. There's some tension there. But you just threw Dolph Ziggler on a SmackDown about a week or two ago and being jealous of all of the Kofi Kingston love. Not enough time to really present anything out there. I thought the guys fought okay. It wasn't a clunky match or anything, but I was a little disappointed in that. Braun Strowman defeated Bobby Lashley. These two men should be main eventers. Physically, they're strong, they're big. You would think that'd be a model for Vince McMahon that he would like to have in a champion. But both have been booked inconsistently, especially Bobby Lashley. He is a man that physically fits the part. He should be, outside of Brock Lesnar, should be the most physical, and Braun, Brock, and Lashley should be three of the physically most imposing men in all of WWE, and they're not booked in that way. And then you have these two guys fight in a throwaway match in Saudi Arabia. This could have been done. It should be one of the top 2 or 3 matches on the SummerSlam coming up this summer if it's booked properly. And the winner of that, it should be Strowman, I think. Lashley, very good contender as well, should be right in line for a title shot. But instead, you hot-shot this match, and it just was what it was. And we'll get to some, and this is where the booking got really wacky. Randy Orton defeated Triple H. Two men who have a long history together with Evolution or Evolution. as I like to call it. Respect the Motorhead with that in the song. But you have those two guys going together. First time they fought individually in, I think, more than 10 years. And once again, you have that happen on the Super Show. I didn't like that at all. Both guys looked good. I mean, physically, I thought they were okay. Orton has been fighting more often. He's still more active, so you can tell that from the match. But overall, I thought that match was whatever. Here's where it really got weird. Lars Sullivan defeating Lucha House Party. Look, Lars is a very big man. He's very skilled. I think he has good fluidity for a man his size. His mic skills are okay. You could tell that you're trying to build him up as a unbeatable big man, kind of using the Braun Strowman playbook from about 3-4 years ago. So I like that part of it. But why does he have to beat the 3 luchadors in the match? It gives no credibility to not only the luchas, but also that 205 division at all. Look, squash matches are fine. If you have Lars beating one of those guys one-on-one, I can kind of deal with it. Or if you had a match where it was I'm sure what the term would be, where it'd be like a cycle, like you'd face one guy, you defeat him, you face the second guy, you struggle a little bit more, and then the third one, you figure, okay, I'm on number 3, I'm really struggling because it's my third match in a row. And even if Lars wins in that way, I still wouldn't necessarily like it, but I can kind of comprehend it. But for Lars to be strong, fighting all 3 men at the same time, that's a very bad look. I look at Lucha House Party now. I don't respect them in any regard, whether they're fighting individually or fighting in a tag match or a 6-man tag, whatever combination. If it's a traditional tag match, any 2 of those 3, I have no respect for them because they were unable to beat a grown man 3-on-1. And yes, I know it's professional wrestling, and you have to suspend your disbelief, but to have it in that way, I can't have that. It's not like Andre the Giant fighting the little people back in the 70s and 80s, and it's that type of deal. Even then, you look back on that now, and it's like, I don't know if that's necessarily politically correct or would make much sense, but you can't have 3 grown men. I know they're little, they're luchas, but you can't have 3 grown men in the ring at the same time, unable to beat one man. And I don't care if it's Lars or Brock or Braun or Hulk Hogan or Rock or Stone Cold in their prime, whatever, or Ric Flair, any all-time wrestler you want to put out there. You can't have one man beating 3 at the same time. So when I saw that take place, I didn't like that. Or you can't have them all 3 fighting at the same time and him losing or him winning that type of match. So I didn't like the booking of that at all. As I said, it just gives no credibility to the luchas, and that's been an issue with WWE since beginning of time, really. But they really highlighted it there with the match, and I didn't like that at all. Another thing I didn't like is Shane McMahon winning over Roman Reigns. I know Drew McIntyre was out there and had an influence on the match, but there's no way that Shane McMahon, who is not a real wrestler, I know he fights in these matches, he's been feuding with Miz and all that type of stuff, but there's no way that Roman Reigns, a man that for the past 5 years, you've had him become a multiple-time champion, he's main evented WrestleMania, he's become a major player in your organization, and you have him losing to a part-time wrestler. And yes, I know that part-time wrestler is Shane McMahon, but that's unacceptable as far as the booking goes. Similar to the Luchas, not to the extreme degree as with Lars in that match, but how do I respect Roman Reigns now as a future champion, which you know eventually they're going to circle back to, him being back in the title picture. How can I respect that man when he is losing to, and Shane, once again, looks like he's in tremendous shape. You know he's working out. He's been in the ring quite a bit over his time in WWE. He's not like a novice or some actor that they pulled out from the street, but to have him defeating Roman Reigns relatively cleanly. I mean, I know Drew had some interference in there, but to have that happen is just bizarre booking from this show. Finn Balor defeated Andrade to retain the IC belt. I like that booking. Keep the belt on Finn for a little bit, maybe through the summer. Finn was a Universal Champion for the first Universal Champion. I mean, technically, because he won it after the Raw with WrestleMania a few years ago when he introduced the belt, and then he injured his shoulder and he had to give up the belt and everything like that. So Finn, I think, can find his way in the main event picture eventually, but having the IC belt is good for him at this stage. Speaking of the Universal belt, Seth Rollins was able to defeat Baron Corbin, won it relatively easily. I understand why they're trying to have a placehold for Seth and Brock to fight eventually, but these intermediate teases of having Brock cash in his Money in the Bank briefcase has become annoying. We've dealt with it the past 3 weeks where they keep saying Brock's going to cash in, he's going to cash in, and we know that they're doing that to manipulate the ratings and try to get more eyes on the product. But after a while, you keep crying wolf, I'm going to stop watching, and that's what myself and other people have started doing. Then we have the Super Show coming up, and Brock says he's going to be there, he's flying there, he's going to cash it in. We're finally going to see it go down. So Brock comes down the ring. Seth is able to get and the way it was so silly how they did it as well. So Brock is walking to the ring. He gets in the ring. Paul Heyman, his advocate, trips over the ropes in some goofy way. Brock is distracted. Seth is able to get some punches in and get Brock down and do a curb stomp on the briefcase. So there was no cash in. It's so annoying how the concept of this briefcase, I like it on Brock, but the way it should be operated or the way it should be done is that we don't see Brock for a month and a half. Every week, every end of Raw, when Seth is out there, he's looking over his shoulder. You have little teases. You can have maybe a few Seth finishes a tough match, a few notes from the theme, Brock's theme plays, and then it cuts off. So, or you can have the song go for about 30 seconds. Seth is scared. He's looking around, doesn't know where Brock is, and it's just mind game, starts messing with them. And then eventually you get Seth annoyed, and you get Seth, even though he's a champion in the baby face, and Brock is the one chasing, you get Seth calling him out and saying, you know what, you keep teasing it, you keep messing with the fans, let's just make it official, book it for SummerSlam, which is eventually is what's going to happen. We all know what's going to be. But there are ways to manipulate it. Maybe use social media. You can have Brock showing up where Seth trains, and they're trying to do that with the 24/7 Championship, this concept of anytime, anywhere. But you can really play with the video packages and manipulate where this check-in or this briefcase cashing it in, when and where it can happen. But to have Brock out there for 3 straight weeks of Raw and just standing there and saying that, not knowing the rules of the briefcase, like, I have it for a year, it's just massive confusion. And then once again, you had it at the Super Show itself where Brock is there. You've been teasing this whole time. All right, we're going to have it at a Super Show. He doesn't do it, and it just annoys everybody. So I didn't like how they did that overall. Let's see. Finally, the Usos defeated the Revival. 2 talented tag teams. Revival just need to leave WWE. They're not going to go anywhere with that current organization. I know that everyone wants them to see them in AEW because the Revival and the Young Bucks have had some tension online with the Revival and all that stuff. That'd be intriguing. Usos as well, even though Usos signed a long-term deal, they have some issues with the Guerrillas of Destiny, even though I think that's just some Samoan love-hate or some Samoa tension with the Guerrillas of Destiny out of New Japan. We'll get to GOD later on the show. But I thought that was an okay match. Usos are the champs. I think keep the belts on them for a little bit. But I think overall, my theory in life, one of my theories in life, and similar to sports viewing, is that if it's free, the complaints are minimal. Now, technically, the network isn't free, but it's part of a package you pay for, $10 a month. I'm watching NXT. I'm watching old videos, watching the original content they have on their very good channel. So this show wasn't an extra amount of money out of my pocket. So my complaints aren't I hated the show. It's terrible. WWE is going down. It's more like just like that type of feeling. Like it was okay, but it wasn't like the greatest show that I've ever seen. And I think that's the impression that I saw from a lot of people out there about it. I don't see any storylines really develop as far as towards the future. The whole Brock thing, I guess maybe the only thing you'll see some carryover. You're not going to see Undertaker and Goldberg in a wrestling ring for a very long time, if ever again. I don't think. I think both those guys at this stage, they've made their money. Goldberg's a Hall of Famer. He'll still be around. But as far as wrestling in a match like that, never again. I'm just going through the card and trying to see some other things there. As to the Lars Sullivan thing we went over with the Lucha House Party. But I said the card overall I thought was okay. Another 3+ hour show. That is the one drawback with the network is the time limitations on these shows don't exist anymore. When back in the old pay-per-view model, you'd start a show at Eastern time, 8 o'clock, had to be off by 11, just because the way that the cable networks work as the pay-per-views, things along those lines. And we've seen with WrestleMania over the past 2-3 years under the network, you got to have a show 5-6 hours, literally. And that's a lot of wrestling to sit through. And that's why I did not see the Super Show live. I actually watched it in different parts or increments. So I watched about an hour here, had work, real life things. Then I went back to the show. Things like that's the way I'm watching it. But to expect someone to sit there for 3+ hours and watch a show is tough. And to be fair, be objective, New Japan, same thing. With Dominion, that was 4 hours of wrestling. And look, I love wrestling. It's great, but 4 hours is a lot. Once again, with that one, it was watched over a 2 to 3 day period. Unfortunately, I didn't know the results from the Super Show when I watched it, but New Japan, I actually knew who won and lost. So I watched the match with knowing the results, which is not the worst thing in the world. But man, when you talk about time differences too, the WWE show started, I think, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on Friday afternoon. That's very hard. And that's not their fault. That's what Saudi Arabia, you're working with their time. So I'm not complaining about that, but it's just tough to deal with. New Japan, same deal. It's even worse. The show technically starts at 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time if you do the time difference as far as all of the Japan shows. But, I mean, that's where the shows are. You have to deal with it and adjust to it. But we're going to take another break, and when we come back, we're going to get into that New Japan Dominion show and all of my thoughts on it here on the Verbal Submission. Okay, we're back. Welcome to the Verbal Submission. I keep wanting to say the Sports Inquirer show. There's different shows, Verbal Submission. This is specifically talking about the world of combat sports. New Japan Dominion took place on June 9th. As I just mentioned previously, I did not wake up at 3 a.m. to watch this show. I have done some early shows before, especially when you get to there are other events, but 3 a.m., that'd been rough. But I did watch the show over a 2-day period. I like the action a lot more than the Super Show. And to be fair, Dominion is kind of like it's not their WrestleMania. The WrestleMania is they do on New Year's in Tokyo. So this is kind of like their Survivor Series equivalent, Dominion. So it was a very good show overall, I thought. I liked what I saw from the wrestling side and some storylines that they're trying to develop into the summer period. A very big summer for New Japan because you have the G1 tournament, which is kind of like their old school King of the Ring, where you have a tournament and then the winner ultimately gets a title shot at the main show in January. So you saw some title matches. A lot of titles changed hands, but you also saw some guys throwing their hat into the ring for G1. We'll start off with Johnny Moxley, the former Dean Ambrose. He made quick work of his match. He defeated Juice Robinson earlier that week for the IWGP U.S. Heavyweight Championship. So he came into his match, and let's see, pull up the match here. He defeated Umino, yes. So Moxley defeated Umino in 4 minutes. So that's a squash match. and he is now he was previously the U.S. heavyweight champion. He came into the match with that belt, and he was able to retain it with the victory. Moxley is making a lot of noise in the professional wrestling world. You saw him making his appearance on Double or Nothing for AEW, and had his match there, or he didn't have a match. Secondly, he interfered. Well, post-match of the Jericho-Omega main event, he came in, took out Jericho, and took out Omega and a referee as well. So now he's with AEW, but he has the ability to fight with other organizations, and one of those is New Japan. Very excited about this because I was worried about the New Japan and AEW relationship being strained because they're competition, but we've also seen some crossover with Cody and with the Young Bucks and Omega, obviously. They were very tremendous performers in New Japan, and now they're in AEW. I wanted to see if they would have some synergy and be able to do that. It looks like New Japan is sticking with their Ring of Honor commitment, but AEW, I want to see all these organizations work together. And having Moxley be in AEW and now do matches in New Japan, and I believe he's fighting for European Federation later on this month as well. So that's very exciting. And Moxley is throwing his hat into the ring for the G1 events that are taking place. And a lot of them are taking place in the United States. And I believe the championship match or the finals of the G1 are in the United States this year, which is very rare. And they've done some matches in the United States before. They've in California, but those were kind of one-off events. But to have your G1 final in the United States, I believe it's in Texas and Dallas, is a major deal for New Japan. So to have Jon Moxley, United States resident, very popular here in this part of the world, put his name in the G1 hat and have the U.S. Heavyweight Championship, that's a very good thing. Okada defeated Chris Jericho to retain the IWGP Heavyweight title. I thought that was the right call. Okada is going to make a big run here. Arguably, at least with this generation, he's like the John Cena of New Japan. A lot of title reigns, long tenures, short list all-time great, and he's in his prime right now. So him defeating Chris Jericho I thought was good. Very good match. I like the physicality of it. Okada's versatility is so good. You've seen him have high-flying matches with the likes of Kenny Omega, and they're all-timers over the past few years. And then you have him in a match with Jericho, who's not at that stage of his career. It's more of a brawling style, more of a grind. And Okada is still able to adjust to that and find a way to win. As some would make the case, he's the best wrestler in the world. I don't really do best of the world type deals, but he's definitely on a short list of 2 or 3 guys. If you wanted to make that list, he'd be right there. So I thought his match was good for Jericho. And Jericho's another AEW guy. As I mentioned, he fought Kenny Omega in Double or Nothing in the main event. So Jericho being able to work in Japan and with AEW is a very good thing. Naito was able to defeat Ibushi to earn the IWGP Intercontinental Championship. Naito is going to be a major player, I believe, in the G1. We saw Okada and Naito fight in the main events of for in the January card. I think that's a match that they want to have come up again in the near future. So we'll see what happens there. It was a very technically sound match. Once again, Ibushi, another guy, if you made a list of top 5 or top 10 wrestlers, he'd be right there. So I enjoyed watching that match quite a bit. Maybe the favorite visual match of the entire show was Will Osprey and Dragon Lee. Will was able to win the match and earn the IWGP Light Heavyweight title. Will's been on a tremendous run with New Japan. He won the best of the juniors, the Super Juniors tournament, the previous, I think the week before, and he was able to defeat Dragon Lee for the title. Will's a guy that we've seen in different organizations bouncing around. He's found a home in New Japan, and that was as the best match I thought on the card. A lot of high flying, some technicality as well, which is something we like to see in the match. I mean, you could do 10 somersaults, and that's great. But it's also good to see holds and some strategy, and that being used in the match as well. And Dragon Lee, I didn't realize how young Dragon Lee was. Dragon and Will, I think they're both 25 years old or around that age range. So we add those two guys, and then Jay White, the former heavyweight champion, he's 25 or 26. Great future for those guys in the world of New Japan. But that's going to be very intriguing what they see with Osprey, because I think he's a guy who I've always said you have New Japan. Okada is the main guy. He's great. And then you have guys like Naito and Tanahashi, tremendous wrestlers as well. But they're in Japan. That's awesome. But what New Japan's trying to do is expand beyond Japan, like all organizations are trying to do. And you're seeing that done in the United States, which is a big market for them, and Europe, and Australia as well. They're doing some cards in Australia and New Zealand. They've done those before, so that's not completely unique. But they're trying to get into the United States and Europe. And you have the main. I thought with the Young Bucks and Cody, that would have been a way to get that going, and Omega as well. But those guys are obviously in AEW doing their thing. You have Jay White, the New Zealander, a young guy, speaks excellent English, legitimately can draw some heat for being a bad guy. He's great in that regard as far as trying to cross over. And if Osprey could be a guy that they can retain and put in a major way, that gives you Europe. You add that together with a Dragon Lee who has the mask and that fighting ability, not much of a talker in that regard. And I'm not saying these guys are going to be main eventing and carrying the card, because I said you have Okada and Naito and those guys along those lines. Those guys are the main guys. We get that. But if you can have those English-speaking guys from European and Australian and New Zealand and have those guys in your arsenal, that's going to carry a lot of weight into these new territory or territories that they're trying to expand in. And Moxley is a part of that card, is part of that deal as well. I just don't know what his deal is as far as how often he's going to fight with New Japan. I know he says he's going to be in the G1 and all that, but I don't know long term what Moxley's kind of role is going to be. So also, and we'll wrap up with two more things from the Dominion show. Guerrillas of Destiny with my boys Tonga Loa and Tama Tonga, my favorite tag team maybe in all of wrestling. They're able to defeat Los Inquirer de Japón, Evil and Sonata, to retain the IWGP championships, the tag titles. GOD, tremendous guys. Obviously, the sons of Haku, and are making their presence felt in the world wrestling. Leaders, and those two in Jay White with Bullet Club, which has kind of gone through a transformation from the Bucks and Omega. They've moved on to AEW, so now GOD and Jay White are kind of bringing more of the darker side of Bullet Club into the fold. I like that part of it, and they had a very good match against Increíbles de Japón with Evil and Sonata, a team that individually they can fight, but as a team they're very good. I like to see that feud carry on a little bit longer, and it will, because Evil and Sonata aren't going anywhere. And I think visually those guys are good because of their entrances. We have a Sonata kind of with that spiked mask he wears, and an Evil with the robe and then the sickle, that the little, I guess that you would see from the Grim Reaper. So visually, those guys carry a lot of weight. And it's a GOD as well, Tongaloa and Tamatanga, tremendous performers as well. So I like that match. And finally, kind of outside of the ring, you had two guys make their presence felt with Kenta, formerly for Hideo Itami, if you've seen him in WWE and NXT, and then Shibata. They both made an appearance at G1. Shibata he wants to be in G1. He's a legendary guy in that federation, and that was very good to see him. And he came out and announced it, and then surprise was Hideo Itami, or Kenta, as he's going by now. I thought Kenta fought in New Japan before, but I guess technically he has not fought there in the past, or at least on a full-time basis. Obviously, he's Japanese and was fought in some other organizations, but him making his full-time appearance and going to be part of G1 is a unique situation for New Japan. So I said I liked what I saw from the show. We'll see what the G1 tournament brings to the table. I think you're going to end up seeing a combination of Naito, Ibushi, Tanahashi, one of those three in the final to face Okada. Will's intriguing if he makes that, if he goes into that G1. He already has a light heavyweight title. I don't know if he's going to make that big of a leap. You got to figure Jay White isn't going to be going anywhere as well. He's going to at least get a match or two and be right there. And Moxley, I don't know how my concern, well, not concern, but my thing about Moxley is how long is he going to be in New Japan? If he has a long-term deal with them, I don't see why he can't make a long run in the G1 tournament. So we'll see what happens when that takes place or throughout this summer. All right, we're going to take one final break, and when we come back, we're going to touch on some UFC and boxing here on the Verbal Submission. All right, we're back, and welcome to the final segment of the Verbal Submission. UFC 238 thoughts. I thought you saw two champions that are in their primes right now, dominating in a big way. We'll start with the Women's Flyweight Championship with Shevchenko. She was able to defeat Jessica Ai for the Women's Flyweight title with a vicious head kick that was one of the nastier ones that you will ever see. She was able to get that kick in and knocked Ai out. She was down on the mat for a very long time. And Shevchenko right now, you have to figure, she not only is she the champion, she's starting to clean out the division a little bit. Obviously, the good part about that division is that you're going to see a lot of people come in there. But if you look at what she's done, she was able to beat Joanna Jędrzejczyk. She was able to beat Jessica Ai, as I said just recently. So she is starting to find her way in that division overall. And just as I said, one of the highlight kicks that you're ever going to see in the UFC. So she was able to get the win. Henry Cejudo, he defeated, if I can say it correctly, Marion Morales. Moraes, and he was able to. He was a current flyweight champion, and now he's a two-time champion with winning the bantamweight title. So now he is a two-division champion in the UFC. We'll see what happens in that division overall, but it got a TKO in the third round and was able to, now he's a two-time champion. So he puts himself right in line with Randy Couture, BJ Penn, as far as holding two titles at the same time, or holding a title throughout their career in two divisions. We'll keep it simple because there's some logistics to it. But with Randy Couture, BJ Penn, George St. Pierre, you got to remember when he beat Bisping, he is the middleweight champion and obviously the welterweight champ, and our boy Conor McGregor. So he has put himself in legendary company. And Daniel Cormier, got to remember Cormier. And he is, and Amanda Nunes. Well, that's a lot more than I thought. But Cormier currently has two belts, and now Cejudo does as well. So we will see what happens with that. And then finally, Tony Ferguson was able to defeat Donald Cerrone, the Dr. Stoppage's second round. Ferguson was beating up on, or visually was able to beat up on Cerrone pretty good there. Swollen right eye, really nasty cut or situation for Cerrone. So the fight was stopped in the correct way. Ferguson, he's on a roll. You got to figure, when's the man going to get a title shot? Now, he did have a title shot scheduled earlier in his career, but then he got injured, or he couldn't do it because it was supposed to be him and Khabib were supposed to fight in April of 2018 at UFC 223, but Ferguson had he tore his fibular collateral ligaments, so that doesn't sound good. But that would have been his title shot to fight for the lightweight championship. Did not happen. But now with this win over Donald Cerrone, you have to figure that him and Habib, can eventually fight. But I guess Habib has some other plans as well. But the man is on an 11 fight winning streak. So whenever Habib takes care of his business, you have to figure he's right there. Or maybe he can fight Conor McGregor, get a nice paycheck, take care of Conor, hopefully for his sake, and that'll be a way to find his way back into the title picture. And as far as boxing goes, 2 major rematches have been announced. Canelo Alvarez and Golovkin, Triple G, look like they're going to fight for the 3rd time for the middleweight championship later on in the year. These two have had very competitive fights previously. First one was a draw. I thought Triple G won that fight. Second fight went to Alvarez by decision. I thought Triple G won that fight as well, but I'll give credit to Canelo. He was more aggressive in that second fight and was able to find a way to get more rounds. The third fight will be tremendous. These two guys just have a tremendous fighting style that works well together. Obviously, you have Golovkin, who is straightforward, backs down from nobody. Canelo, more of a counter fighter. So counter fighters versus aggressive guys leads to, of course, good fights. And those two are 2 best middleweights in the world right now. So I'm very excited to see what happens down there. I guess they're trying to find a location and venue and all that jazz. When that fight happens, we get close to it, we'll preview it, of course. And then the heavyweight championship, we talked about Andy Ruiz on the last verbal submission and his upset win over Anthony Joshua a few weeks ago. It looks like that rematch is going to happen sooner than we thought. I guess the works are for them to fight in MSG again, possibly later on in the year. As usually the typical case of when there's an upset, the guy who was upset, like Joshua, wants to get the rematch as quickly as possible because you figure Ruiz is going to rest on his laurels and not train and be on the celebratory tour with the championship belt, so you want to get him immediately. It's kind of a similar style with the Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran style when that first fight took place and Duran got the win. Sugar Ray wanted that rematch immediately because he knew Duran would be out of shape and not focused. And obviously we saw the second fight, Leonard was able to get the win and continue on in his career. I think he's trying to do the same playbook here, except I think in this case, it's going to be interesting because I thought Ruiz, I don't want to say out of shape because I think there's been some fat shaming with Ruiz just because of his build and his size. People are not respecting his athletic skill. So I think that what you'll see from Ruiz is a more in shape fighter, if that's possible. The thing about the Ruiz and Joshua first fight is that Ruiz only had about a month to train for it. Big Baby Miller was supposed to fight Joshua at MSG and have that big fight take place. Miller failed the drug test, caused the fat fight to be canceled. Ruiz steps in and obviously wins. And I think if you give him extra time, which you'll have now, he'll be in better shape and he'll look tighter. But I don't know if that's going to be much of an advantage for Joshua. Now, Joshua's a tremendous fighter himself, big-time champion. Physically, you look at him and it's like that guy looks like the heavyweight champion of the world. But he's been knocked down multiple times in his career, even when he was able to beat Klitschko to earn the 4 belts that he currently has. He was knocked down early in that fight. He was able to get back up and win in England. It was one of the better matches that you'll ever see. But the point is, Ruiz was able to touch him in the first fight. What's going to change in the second fight when Ruiz should be in better shape and more conditioned? I just think it's one of those matchups similar to back in the day, I'm going way back, with Ken Norton and Muhammad Ali, where Ali was able to get past Norton, but those were some tough fights, and Norton broke Ali's jaw in one of the fights. You have these matchups where it's just tough to beat them. It's kind of similar if you go back in that same era with George Foreman. Foreman beat everybody. Beat Frazier in Jamaica, big-time champion. For Ali, obviously, the Rumble in the Jungle, we all know what happened there. So sometimes you just have fights with certain guys that it's not going to work out well for him. And I think Ruiz may be that type of guy for Joshua. But it's a fight that does need to happen just to give some clarity to it. And you would hope that eventually you'd get Tyson Fury involved in there and Wilder. It's very annoying having 3 different heavyweight champions in the sport. It's very confusing because you have Joshua, you see him with all, or now Ruiz with the 4 belts, and you figure, all right, he's a champion. But then you have Wilder, he has a belt. All right, so is he the champion? And then Tyson Fury, who's fighting this weekend, he's the lineal champion. What does that mean if you're a fan or a spectator? How do you comprehend that? So what they need to eventually, when I guess we're going to see the Fury and Wilder rematch later on this year, and then if Fury loses tomorrow, which he very well can, he's a big favorite, but it's boxing, you never know. If he loses the fight, then that's going to be even more monkey wrenching because now Fury's going to want to fight his opponent to get the lineal championship back. It's all over the place. But I think that maybe by this time next year, we can finally get a unification fight, and that will settle a lot of confusion that you have in the world of professional boxing. But at least we're starting to see some matchups and some intrigue. I think Ruiz winning is a good thing because, and if he wins again, it'll be even better because I don't know if Joshua and Wilder are ever going to fight. There's too much tension between their camps, a lot of jabbing, a lot of verbal sparring, and they just couldn't find a way to get into the ring together. At least with Ruiz having the championship, maybe he'll be more willing to fight Wilder, and then, or maybe fight the winner of Wilder and Fury. So that's a good thing. Joshua maybe is humbled by this and will now fight Wilder. I don't know. But the point is, I'm saying all this. I spent about 3-4 minutes talking about all these scenarios when, in the end, they just all need to fight together in like a tournament. The winner of Ruiz and Joshua fights the winner of Wilder and Fury, and we have a unified situation, which I think may happen, but we'll see what happens from there. All right, that's the conclusion of Verbal Submission. Thanks for listening. As always, if you want to find out everything that we're doing, go to thesportsinquirer.net. Premier site for news and notes in the world of sports. Twitter and Instagram, Sports Inquirer. That's all one word. Facebook, The Sports Inquirer. And then finally, go to YouTube and SoundCloud and look up The Sports Inquirer, and that'll be a great way to get all of the archives of our past shows, our present shows, and when we do shows in the future. Until next time, good fight, good night.